Hello and welcome to this review of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. Con and I are here to give you our thoughts on this shoe, and I'll be doing most of the talking because Con is just way too cool for that. So Con just reminded me, thank you Con, that I need to disclose that even though this shoe is not supposed to be released for another month, that doesn't mean I got it from ASICS. I still paid my own money for this shoe and I paid full price. It just so happens that my local retailer has a relationship with ASICS, so I was able to buy it a little bit earlier than everyone else. Here we have the specs and features of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. And we will start with the upper. This is a Motion Wrap 3.0 upper, and I'll talk about how this upper has evolved from the previous versions of the Metaspeed Sky line. Here's the Metaspeed Sky Plus. This has the same Motion Wrap upper as the OG Metaspeed Sky, which is one pattern of stitching. For as minimal as it was still pretty comfortable. It was easy going on foot. When I was comparing this with other shoes years ago, it did go on the foot a lot more easily than some of the other super shoes. And it has the serrated laces, that kind of like felt faux suede tongue, and a pretty rigid heel counter, and a fair amount of smooth padding around the heel cup. Then when we move on to the Metaspeed Paris, the stitching in the Motion Wrap 2.0 is really what changed. It's a little bit more coarse, but it's also thinner and lighter weight. Still have the sawtooth laces, still have the padding around the collar there and the same tongue. It's pretty much just as substantial as in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. Same heel counter there. Not all that flexible, but it never really bothered me. We move on to the current version, and a lot of it is the same. The Motion Wrap 3.0 is a lot finer stitching than the Motion Wrap 2.0 in the Paris series. And also there's this band across the forefoot here, which isn't really so much of a band, it's just a different stitching pattern that goes laterally there that I assume is meant to keep the foot more locked in that wide aspect of the forefoot there. But it feels thinner. I tried it on briefly in the store and it seems to fit well. We have the same sawtooth laces, the same barely reinforced eyelet chain, same heel counter, a little bit of the padding around the heel collar, but I think one of the weight saving measures here was this padding stops right here. Right at where the bottom aspect of the tibia is, which is actually kind of the side of the heel. So we have just this exposed bit of faux suede here leading up to the eyelet chain. Whether that will be abrasive or not, well, I guess we'll have to find out. Moving down to, well, I'm going to skip the midsole because that's the most exciting part. Outsole, pretty much staying in line with the previous model. Almost identical. I think it's just the color that has changed, but they kept the exact same pattern, including this little camouflaged white piece here. And even though they didn't use the red versus the black outsoles for the Sky and the Edge on the Plus model, it still is pretty much a similar model. This feels a little bit beefier on the Sky Plus. It just doesn't have that little identifying cutout scalene triangle there in the forefoot. But the midsole, once we move on to that, that's where the big changes are made. Going back to the Sky Plus Flight Foam Turbo, this was a nylon-based foam, very durable. I have well over 100 miles on these, and other than a little bit of abrasion, they feel just like they did coming out of the box. This foam isn't going anywhere. This is a tank. This has really become more of a performance trainer for me ever since the Edge Paris and Sky Paris came out. And even though I'm more of an Edge runner, a cadence runner, I still run in both the Edge and Sky series. And here we have the Sky Paris. I don't have nearly as many miles on it, but this is where my abrasion is. The Flight Foam Turbo Plus, all PIBA based, and I think this is a more responsive PIBA than some of the other PIBAs on the market, and I think it's just tuned more for a quick bounce than some of the really squashy PIBAs. So moving on to the Sky Tokyo. You all have already seen plenty of early reviews about this shoe, so you know the deal. We have the Flight Foam Turbo Plus on the top, which is the PIBA, and in this version it's a pretty thin layer of Flight Foam Turbo Plus, but it's not all that thinner than the top layer of it above the plate in the previous version. What is different is the thick layer under the plate, and that is Flight Foam Leap, which instead of PIBA is an aliphatic TPU, which is being used more and more with some of the really high performance models like the Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3 and the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 to a lot of success. It feels really light. It feels like it might be unstable. For me, not really being much of a heel striker, I don't think I'll be worrying as much about that instability, but this also might be where some of that weight saving is taking place as well. Speaking of weight, the right shoe I weighed at 167 grams, between 166 and 167. That is a high 5.8 ounces, which is an extremely low weight. And then the left shoe I weighed at 163 grams, which is low 5.7 ounces. I usually think it's impressive when a racing shoe goes below 7 ounces or 200 grams. We are below 170 grams in a men's US size 9.5 in these shoes, which is very impressive. I am excited to try these on. I have Run the South 10K tomorrow, and I was thinking of trying these, but the poll I put out earlier this week had you guys choosing this shoe for that race, and I don't want my first run in these to be a race, especially since half of that course is unpaved, and I'm not really sure what kind of wet or dry conditions that gravel will be in, so I don't want this new shoe to get all dirty on that mixed surface course. I will wear its predecessor, and believe me, these shoes will be going up against one another in the shoe off as well, among others. All right, let's get to road testing. Good morning. About to do my first run in the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, and it's going to be about 90 minutes where I'm going to try and cycle through some different paces and see how it handles at those paces. Right now it's pretty dark outside, but the sun's going to come up in about an hour, so hopefully I can get some good footage on the run. All right, I'm about 52 minutes into a 90-minute run. I did the first 45 minutes at what was going to be an easy, turned out to be a steezy pace. And now I'm throwing in a block of marathon effort at what I think is my current marathon pace. I'm gonna have the stats up on, and I'm gonna flip them over to metric right here too, for those in the rest of the world who are using the right units. My initial thoughts as I'm putting in work during this marathon pace test is this work. You know, these aren't a magic bullet. I don't know if any shoe is a magic bullet, but also nothing occurs in a vacuum. It's about 76 degrees outside with high humidity, and I did do a full send 10K 2 days ago in the predecessor to this shoe, the Sky Paris. So might be some fatigue, but no excuses. Still want to test the shoes out. All right, I'm about to end a 5-minute float between paces here in about 4 seconds. I'm gonna see if I can pull off some half marathon pace right here. Right now it's seeming like no matter what the pace, the shoe feels better as I'm bounding. This is a bounder. It's a cruiser, but it's a bounder. Not really a cranker like the Edge series has been for me. I would really love to see what the Edge is like next to this. Now I'm throwing some ad hoc 5K to 10K effort in toward the end of the run. Feeling better, but still, it's work. All right, well that's done. What was supposed to be a 90-minute run turned out to be an 84-minute run. And the only reason for that is because I ran my intended route too quickly, including the 45 minutes at the beginning, which was supposed to be easy, ended up steezy. Probably ran a little bit too hard for the prospective race efforts today, but I really wanted to put these Sky Tokyo through the paces. And they felt good, but I definitely have some thoughts. It's gonna help me put a shoe off together. I'm gonna try another workout with some shorter, faster paces in these tomorrow. We'll see you then. It's a workout day in the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. I was at the track doing lots of faster paces between 10K pace and 1 mile pace, so a lot of 5K and 3K pace in there too. They feel really good at running fast. They should. They are racing shoes, but they feel a lot better at 5K pace and 10K pace than they do at, say, 1 mile or 3K pace. Basically, the paces where I have to crank and turn over, that's my running style. Yeah, I feel like I would do better with something like the Edge Paris rather than the Sky Tokyo. They're still good. They're still a fast shoe, but they really are best, I think, for settling in at a fast pace like you would during a 10K or maybe a flat 5K. And certainly a longer race like a half marathon. Okay, it's shoe off time. I have the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo here, and I will compare it with the Metaspeed Sky Paris that came just before it, the Nike VaporFly 4, the Adidas Adios Pro 4, the Nike AlphaFly 3, the Saucony Endorphin Elite 1, and the Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3. Alright, here I have the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo versus the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Paris. So, I don't generally consider the Sky Paris to be a firm shoe, but they feel firm compared to the Sky Tokyo. I also don't consider the Sky Paris to be a terribly stable shoe, but they also feel more stable than the Sky Tokyo. I find that when I run in the Sky Paris and Edge Paris, I'm not really thinking about the shoe. I just run fast, whether I'm cruising fast in the Sky Paris or cranking in the Edge Paris. But in the Sky Tokyo, while it's fast and fun to run in, there's a little bit more dynamism, a little bit more compression, resilience, compression, decompression. So I find I am thinking about the ride a little bit more. Not necessarily in a good or a bad way, but yeah, they feel softer. Also feel a little more energetic, but a little less in control. All right, now we have the Sky Tokyo versus the Nike VaporFly 4. When it comes to the uppers, the VaporFly 4 actually hugs the foot a little bit more closely, although I did have to use the extra eyelet to secure my heel, but I have a skinny heel. These shoes are pretty similar in weight. Sky Tokyo is actually a little bit lighter, one of the few shoes that is lighter than the VaporFly 4, but the midsole is really what's talking to me here. The Zoom X, kind of an industry standard foam. The Flight Foam Turbo Plus on the top layer of the Sky Tokyo is a little bit firmer than Zoom X, but the Flight Foam Leap below the plate is a lot softer than Zoom X. And what that creates is an experience that is overall bouncier, more energetic. The VaporFly 4, even though it has a reduced stack from previous versions, is actually maybe a little more stable, but I don't think that's the main selling point of the VaporFly series. Honestly, I think I would take any version of the Metaspeed Sky or Edge over the VaporFly. At this point, the VaporFly is still a decent racing shoe, but yeah, the Sky Tokyo is a lot more fun, if a little bit more chaotic. All right, now I have the Sky Tokyo versus the Adidas Adios Pro 4. And this is a really good frame of reference, especially coming right after the VaporFly 4. The Adios Pro 4 has kind of a similar level of instability as the Sky Tokyo does. The Sky Tokyo is a little bit lighter. Really, the Sky Tokyo feels like kind of a love child of the Sky Paris and the Adios Pro 4. And I love both of those shoes, so that's a good thing. You do want to be aware of that instability late in a long effort. The big difference I'm noticing here is the rocker profile. The Adios Pro 4, of course, has that early stage rocker at 60% of the shoe length, and you really feel that when you compare it to another shoe like the Sky Tokyo with a late stage rocker. I am very interested to see what the Edge Tokyo feels like next to the Adios Pro 4. I don't have the Edge Tokyo yet. I don't know when I'll be able to get it, but that's kind of what's going through my mind with this comparison right now. If I were to choose between two of these, it would be a tough choice. The Adios Pro 4 is cheaper, but the Sky Tokyo is lighter and just as energetic, maybe a little more so. Maybe it would come down to durability, lifespan. All right, I have the Nike AlphaFly 3 and the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. Generally, when I have two lightweight shoes, racing shoes, I don't really worry as much about the weight difference. The AlphaFly 3 is objectively not a heavy shoe, but it's like 50 grams heavier than the Sky Tokyo in my size. That's almost 2 full ounces. And I'm actually feeling that during this comparison. It's like my right leg, I'm having to work a little bit harder. Also, the AlphaFly 3 is more stable, and that is helpful in a long race where you're not as much worried about weight and more worried about the shoe continuing to work with you, especially in the forefoot. However, those AirPods that help with that stability, this is really the only time I would call them this, but they feel a bit clunky next to the forefoot response in the Sky Tokyo. Now, that means these shoes may not share the same use case scenario. I would consider the AlphaFly 3 a long course shoe, and I'm not sure about the Sky Tokyo yet. The Sky Paris I consider more of a all-rounder mid-duration shoe, but the softness of it means it could maybe compete with the AlphaFly 3. Just a totally different experience. I'm not thinking about it as much as I was when I was comparing to some of the other non-mechanical shoes. All right, now I'm comparing the Sky Tokyo with my marathon PR shoe, the Saucony Endorphin Elite 1. Why not the 2? Well, because I sold my Endorphin Elite 2. It was just too unstable for me. So the Endorphin Elite 1 is the epitome of smooth cruiser for me. Set in a goal pace, lock into it, stay there, and it's just gonna disappear on your feet. I think the Sky Tokyo is gonna occupy a very similar space. Now, it's not quite as disappear on your feet. It's a little bouncier, more energetic, but it's also less stable, which means it's not 100% out of mind. But it is fun. It's not a worrying sensation. I guess if you're gonna be thinking about your shoe while you're running it, the thoughts should be good thoughts, fun thoughts. I still think the Endorphin Elite 1 has a more comfortable upper for my foot. I think it has the most comfortable upper of any racing shoe that I own. If I were to race a marathon tomorrow, I still might choose the Endorphin Elite 1, but I would pack the Sky Tokyo in my bag just in case. All right, finally, the Sky Tokyo versus the Puma Fast-R Nitro Elite 3. I think the Fast-R Nitro Elite 3 is the new gatekeeper when it comes to comparing top-end super shoes, especially now that aliphatic TPU as a midsole compound has made it a little bit more into the mainstream. These shoes both encourage sustained fast running, but in different ways, different experiences. Side by side, the Sky Tokyo feels a little bit bouncier when landing midfoot. Get up on the forefoot, and it's all Fast R Nitro Elite 3. So it depends what you really favor and what you're going to be relying on late in the race. Landing midfoot, it is reassuring to have the non-decoupled midsole in the Sky Tokyo, but it's not really bothersome in the Fast R Nitro Elite 3. Fast R Nitro Elite 3 has definitely got it beat on the outsole game with the Puma grip, but the ASICS grip on the Metaspeed series is still pretty tacky. Depending on the race distance, I would still probably reach for the Fast R Nitro Elite 3, but once we get past that 90-minute frame, I'd really have to think about it, I think. I guess more in the shoe talk. Okay, it's shoe talk time here, and this is an interesting evolution of the ASICS Metaspeed Sky line. This is the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, as you know, and I'm going to bring 3 different shoes up here to discuss in the context of this shoe. The first one, Nike VaporFly 4. You saw this one on the shoe off. The reason I'm bringing this one up, other than the fact that they are of very similar weight, is that right now in summer, June 2025 in the United States, these are the same price. And I'm here to tell you, if you're trying to decide between 2 of these, choose the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo when it comes out in July, that is. Like I've said about the VaporFly 4, it's a decent shoe, but it's not worth the VaporFly price and VaporFly hype anymore. So I'm going to toss that one down there. Second shoe is the predecessor, the Metaspeed Sky Paris, and I've been bringing up this shoe a lot in this video. If you like this shoe, you will probably like the Sky Tokyo, but it depends on why you like the Metaspeed Sky Paris. If you like the Metaspeed Sky Paris more than the other competitors because it's got a more direct response, it's a little bit firmer, a little bit snappier, not quite as cushy, then you might want to think twice about the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo, not just because the price increased, but because it is so much softer, especially in the heel. And most of the people I know who like the Sky Paris aren't necessarily heel strikers. They're more people who land midfoot or on the forefoot, but I can definitely tell that the Sky Tokyo definitely has more of that bounding vertical response built into it, like the Skyline is supposed to have, rather than the cranking forward response that the Edge line is going to have into it. So if you like this shoe for its stability and its directness, you may not get as much of that from this, but if you were thinking, hey, I like this shoe, I think it's light, I think it's economic, but I just wanted a little bit more energy return, a little more bounce, then this might be right up your alley, the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. Now I have to bring up what I think a lot of people consider is the GOAT of racing shoes right now, and that's the Puma Fast R Nitro Elite 3. And if you are one of those that really bounds off the forefoot, then I still think that this might be a better option than this, but they are really more peers than they are in separate tiers. And I think, like I said during the shoe off, they really achieve it in a different way. This is a shoe that I can really cruise in, the Sky Tokyo, because all of that energy return is underneath the foot, underneath the forefoot, and also into the rear foot. The rear foot is not stable, and I'm a forefoot striker, midfoot striker, so I don't really worry about that as much, but sometimes that instability kind of ekes its way into the rest of the shoe so that it's in the back of your mind, if not just the back of your foot. This isn't a terribly stable shoe, but it's the same density in the rear foot and in the forefoot. And what I get from this shoe is I can cruise in this shoe, but I also get something that I don't necessarily get in the Sky Tokyo, and that's I can crank in this shoe. It's got that outrigger lever of an extension on the carbon plate there that's protected by Puma grip, and I really feel like when I dig into those high gears, I'm getting a little something. If it's from that or just from the general geometry of the shoe, I'm getting that. This shoe can cruise and it can crank, but it's also $30 more expensive than this one is. Other than that, they both have that really bouncy and energetic response. It's just whether you want it under your foot or more towards the front of your foot. The Metaspeed Sky Tokyo is still lighter than the Puma Fastar Nitro Elite 3, and it's one of the few that is. So that's my thoughts regarding what I think are a couple that are at the top tier of racing shoes at the moment. I also want to say that I talked last week during my Run the South 10K video about how I think the Metaspeed Sky Paris is optimal for half marathon down to 10K, maybe a little bit on either side of that. And I think it might be a little bit harsh on the foot after 90 minutes to 2 hours. I think the Sky Tokyo could go longer underfoot and feel better because it's cushier, it's bouncier, and it has that underfoot comfort. I have about 45 kilometers in this shoe, or just under 30 miles in this shoe, and most of those are hard miles, including a couple of back-to-back workouts. And the legs felt really good. I think your large muscle groups are going to be saved by that cushioning property, which is really the saving grace of many of the super shoes that are out there. What I would caution you about is the smaller muscle groups, the stabilizer muscle groups, especially the lower leg muscle groups. That's why I got rid of the Saucony Endorphin Elite 2, is because it was too unstable. And Steven Scullion has a good video on that shoe about how you really have to do your mobility and your stabilizer strength routine in order to really run well in that shoe. You get a little bit of that instability here. This is more stable than the Endorphin Elite 2 is, but it's something that you want to be aware of when you're thinking of the last 30 to 40 minutes of a marathon or last hour of a marathon. It's not going to be as stable as something like its predecessor, but it's fun to run in, and sometimes that is enough to keep you going. Okay, that concludes my shoe talk about the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. If you enjoyed this, please hit like, subscribe, or share this video, ding the bell for notifications, and Con and I will see you on the next run.